My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $250, $0 from our joint account to fund their affair, and now she's claiming part of my inheritance worth over $1 million. How do I even fight this? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this kind of story, but here I am. It all started when I noticed little things, small stuff that didn't add up. My wife, Lisa, had always been a bit of a drama queen, but lately she was acting way more bitchy than usual, snapping at me over nothing, canceling plans last minute, and suddenly she was working late more often than not. I figured she was stressed at her job, which isn't unusual. She's a marketing exec, always chasing some big deal or promotion. But then I found the texts. It started one evening when I was cleaning out my phone and noticed a message from her boss, Mark. At first, I thought it was just work stuff, but the tone was different, flirty maybe. I couldn't tell if I was imagining things, but then I saw a string of messages that made my stomach turn. They were talking about meeting up, to discuss the project, but the way they talked, it was clear it wasn't just work. Mark kept calling her babe, and she responded with "can't wait to see you and miss you already." My heart sank. I mean, I'd suspected she might be cheating, but seeing it right there in black and white, that was a punch to the gut. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started digging. I checked her phone more often, looked at her emails, bank accounts, anything I could find. That's when I saw the bank statements. Over the past 3 months, she transferred roughly $250, $0 from our joint account to an account under her name. That's $250,000, money we saved for years, for our future, for the house, the kids, everything. I couldn't believe it. She stole that money to fund her affair with Mark, no doubt about it. And the worst part, she was acting like I was the one overreacting, calling me paranoid and jealous when I confronted her. When I finally got the nerve to confront her face to face, she was as bitchy as ever. I told her I knew about her affair, about the money, everything. Her eyes narrowed and she snapped back, "You're crazy. You're just jealous because I'm successful and you're not. Mark's the one who's been there for me, not you." She lied about everything, said she was working late to impress her boss, that the money was a loan, that I had no right to question her. But I knew better. I had the proof. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief all at once. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, steal from us, and then lie to my face? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the sneaking suspicion, the texts, the bank transfers. It hit me hard. I loved her, I really did, but she had shattered that. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I couldn't believe I married someone who would do this. And what made it worse was knowing she was going to keep lying, keep pretending everything was fine while she was out screwing her boss and draining our savings. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. All I knew was that my world was falling apart and I was left standing there trying to process how everything had gone so wrong so fast. After that confrontation, everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, her words, her lies, the betrayal. It was like a punch in the gut every time I thought about how she'd stolen our life savings to fund her affair with Mark. That money wasn't just numbers, it was our dreams, our plans. And now it was gone, used to fuel her selfishness. I felt sick, angry, and helpless all at once. The next morning, I decided I needed to get some clarity. I couldn't just sit around and let her keep lying. I started digging deeper into her financials, bank accounts, credit cards, anything that might give me more information. That's when I found the emails between her and Mark, more explicit than before. They'd been planning to run away together, maybe even start a new life somewhere else. Mark was pushing her to leave everything behind, promising her a better future, money, success, all of it. It was clear she was in too deep, and she was willing to burn everything down to be with him. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I wanted her to see I wasn't backing down. I set up a hidden camera in the living room, nothing sinister, just enough to catch her off guard. When she came home that evening, I was waiting. She walked in, looking bitchy as usual. I pressed record and started laying everything out. Her affair, the stolen money, the emails. Her face went pale for a second, then she snapped at me, calling me paranoid, accusing me of spying on her. She claimed I was just jealous, that Mark was a real man who treated her right, unlike me. That's when I saw her true colors. Her tone turned vicious, telling me I was a loser, that she deserved better, that she was tired of my insecurities. I felt my blood boil. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, and I told her she was a lying, manipulative bitch. Her reaction was classic: denial, then anger. She started yelling, calling me controlling, jealous, insecure. But I had the evidence. I played the recordings back for her and her face twisted in rage. She tried to lie her way out of it, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I'd be taking legal action, that she'd have to answer for her lies and theft. That moment was a turning point. I realized I couldn't save this marriage, not after what she did. But I also knew I had to protect what was left of my future. I decided to get a lawyer, started working on a plan to recover the stolen money and prepare for the inevitable legal battle. I also started thinking about my own mental health. How could I trust her again? How could I move past this? It felt like my whole world was crumbling and I was left standing in the rubble trying to piece it back together. I knew I had a long road ahead. The betrayal was deep and the emotional scars were real. But I also knew I had to be strong for myself, for what was left of my dignity. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not anymore. I was done being the victim. Now I was planning my next move, and I wasn't going to rest until I got justice. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in infidelity and financial crimes. Her name was Sarah, and from the moment I explained everything, she was sharp, confident, and no nonsense. She told me I had a strong case for both divorce and recovering the stolen money, especially since I had concrete evidence: texts, bank statements, recordings. It was a relief to finally have someone on my side who knew what she was doing. But even with that, I couldn't shake this feeling of betrayal. Every time I looked at her, Lisa's face would flash in my mind: her sneering, her lies, her cold manipulation. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act. She was still bitchy, still lying, claiming she was saving us from a miserable life with Mark. She told me she was done with the affair, that Mark was just a fling, that I was overreacting because I was insecure. She threw around accusations like they were nothing, calling me jealous, controlling, and saying I'd never understand her ambitions. The worst part was how she insisted she deserved a share of my inheritance. Over $1 million I was set to inherit from my grandfather's estate. She said I was keeping her from her rightful share, that she'd fought so hard for our marriage and deserved her cut. I couldn't believe her audacity. One night I came home to find her packing a bag. She told me she was going to stay with her sister for a while, that she needed space. I looked at her and saw that cold, bitchy smirk, like she thought she had me cornered. But I wasn't going to let her win. I told her she was not going anywhere until this was settled. I had already scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to file for divorce, and I was planning to take her to court over the money. I knew she'd try to fight me on everything, including the inheritance, but I was prepared to go all the way. I wanted her to understand that she wasn't going to walk away with my money or my life. The day I officially filed for divorce was a strange mix of relief and rage. I felt like I was finally taking control of the situation, but at the same time, it hurt knowing I was ending what I thought was a life partner. I had loved her, or at least I thought I had. Now I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative, selfish bitch who would do anything to keep what she wanted. I also started talking to a financial advisor about how to protect what was left of my estate. I didn't trust her not to try to claim part of my inheritance, especially after she kept insisting she was entitled to her fair share. What really shook me was discovering that she had been secretly meeting with her lawyer, trying to figure out how to stake her claim on my inheritance. I found out through a friend who knew her lawyer she'd been making moves behind my back. That was the final straw. I realized she wasn't just after the money she stole. She wanted to take everything I had left. I had to get ahead of her fast. I started documenting everything: her lies, her manipulations, her attempts to claim my estate. I wanted to make sure I had proof if this ever went to court. I was determined to fight her for every penny, every right that I had. All this was happening so fast. It felt like my entire world was collapsing around me, but I refused to let her see me break. I kept telling myself I'd get through this, that I'd come out the other side stronger. I had to. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, not as my wife, not as a person. The betrayal had cut too deep, but I was also starting to see a way out, one where I'd reclaim what was mine and finally put an end to her lies and manipulations. It was going to be a long fight, but I was ready. The legal process moved quicker than I expected, probably because I had all the evidence lined up: texts, bank transfers, recordings, and even witness accounts from friends who saw her sneaking out late at night or acting strangely around Mark. My lawyer, Sarah, was a beast in court. She had everything organized, and she knew exactly how to poke holes in her lies. Lisa, of course, everything initially, playing the victim, claiming I was just jealous and controlling. But the more she lied, the more her story fell apart. One day, I got a call from Sarah. She told me Lisa had filed a counterclaim, trying to claim a portion of my inheritance. Said she deserved her fair share because of the years we'd been married. That hit me like a punch to the stomach. I knew she would try to do this, but hearing her actually follow through made it real. I felt fury boiling inside me. I had worked hard for that inheritance, my grandfather's money, part of my family's legacy, and now she was trying to take it just because she cheated and stole from us. I decided I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I hired a forensic accountant to trace all her financial moves, every dollar she spent, every transfer she made to Mark, every shady transaction. We uncovered some more surprises. She'd been secretly opening accounts, funneling money, even making fake invoices to justify some of her expenses. It was clear she'd been planning to drain us for a while. I also discovered she'd been trying to hide her affair with Mark from her lawyer, which only strengthened my case for fraud and betrayal. Meanwhile, she was still trying to spin her story, acting like the victim. She'd call me, crying fake tears, saying I was ruining her life, that I was just bitter because she'd moved on. She even claimed she was pregnant, another lie, of course. I knew she was just desperate to manipulate the situation. I didn't fall for it. I knew her game now. I had everything on tape, and I was ready to fight her in court. I wasn't going to let her walk away with even a dime of my inheritance, especially not after what she'd done. The day of the court hearing came faster than I thought. I sat there, feeling a mix of exhaustion and rage. Lisa looked ridiculous, trying to act innocent, but her eyes betrayed her. She was sweating, trying to hold back her tears, but I saw right through her. When Sarah presented the evidence, bank statements, emails, recordings, her entire facade started to crumble. The judge asked tough questions, and Lisa's excuses sounded shallow and rehearsed. Her lawyer tried to argue she deserved some of the inheritance because of her contributions, but it was weak. I had the documentation proving she'd been planning her escape, her affair, her theft. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor on almost everything. She ordered Lisa to pay back the stolen $250, $0, plus damages for breach of trust and fraud. She also dismissed Lisa's claim to part of the inheritance, citing her betrayal and misuse of joint funds. It was a huge victory, but I didn't feel victorious. I was drained emotionally, physically, mentally. The woman I loved had turned into a liar, thief, and manipulator, and I had to rebuild my life from the wreckage she left behind. What was left was the aftermath. Lisa was ordered to leave our house, and I started sorting through the mess she left behind. I changed the locks, cleaned out the house, and began the process of moving on, but I also knew I had to be cautious. She made it clear she wasn't done yet. She was still trying to claim her rights, still scheming behind my back. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to sneak back into my life or take more from me. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from all this. Trust is fragile. Money can turn people into monsters if you're not careful. And sometimes, the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest. I don't know where Lisa is now, probably trying to find some way to squeeze more out of me or her legal battles. But I do know one thing: I'm done being the victim. I've fought hard, and I'm finally starting to breathe again. I still feel the sting of betrayal, but I also feel a strange sense of relief. I'm rebuilding my life, and this time I'm doing it on my own terms. After everything was settled legally, I thought I'd finally get some peace. The court's decision felt like a weight lifted, but honestly, the emotional scars ran too deep. I had to keep reminding myself that I'd fought for what was right, that I'd protected what was left of my future. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, that sting that stays long after the court papers are signed. Every time I saw her face in my mind, I remembered her sneering, the lies, the betrayal. I had to find a way to move forward, but it wasn't easy. I started therapy shortly after. It helped me process the anger, the hurt, and the shock of it all. I realized how much I'd been by her manipulations. I used to think she was the love of my life, and now I saw her as a master manipulator who'd used me for years. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I knew I had to rebuild my sense of trust in myself and what I wanted from life. I also started focusing on my career again, throwing myself into work to keep my mind busy. I didn't want to be the guy who got played and then just crumbled. One thing that really stuck with me was how she kept trying to come back into my life, even after everything. She'd send fake apologies, try to guilt-trip me, even claim she'd changed. I wasn't having any of it. I made it clear I didn't want her in my life anymore. She'd burned that bridge beyond repair. I had to cut her out completely. I blocked her on everything: phone, email, social media. I knew she'd try to keep manipulating me, but I refused to let her. I had to protect myself from her toxic influence. I also started rebuilding my finances from scratch. The court ordered her to pay back the stolen money, but I knew she'd never really pay it all back. That's when I hired a private investigator again to keep tabs on her assets. Meanwhile, I worked with my financial advisor to set up protections so she couldn't come after my inheritance or any future assets. I learned a lot during this process: how vulnerable I'd been, how much I'd trusted someone who turned out to be a complete liar. It made me more cautious, more aware of who I let into my life. In the months that followed, I began dating again, but very cautiously. No more rushing into anything. I take things slow now, watching people's actions, not just their words. Honestly, I still have trust issues. I probably will for a long time, but I also know I'm stronger than I was before. I fought for my dignity, my money, my future, and I didn't let her take that away from me completely. I've started to rediscover who I am outside of that nightmare. I've been focusing on my health, my hobbies, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the chaos. Looking back, I realize this whole ordeal has changed me forever. I used to believe in happily ever after, but now I know people can be selfish, manipulative, and downright evil. Still, I also learned that I have the strength to fight back, to stand up for myself, and to rebuild after betrayal. My advice to anyone going through something similar: trust your gut, protect your assets, don't be afraid to fight for what's yours, and most importantly, don't let someone's lies define your life. It's hard, it hurts, but you can come out the other side better, more cautious, more resilient, and maybe a little wiser about who you trust. It's been a long road since I first found out about her affair, her theft, and her blatant betrayal. Honestly, sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with that sick feeling in my stomach, remembering the lies she told and the way she looked at me like I was nothing. But over time, I've learned to live with that pain and turn it into a lesson. I've come to realize that trust, once broken so badly, is almost impossible to fully repair. But what I can do is rebuild my life on my own terms, stronger, wiser, and more cautious than before. The biggest thing I've learned is the importance of protecting yourself, your money, your emotions, your sanity. Never ignore the small signs of trouble, and don't be afraid to dig deep if something feels off. I thought I knew her, thought she was my partner for life, but she turned out to be someone I barely recognize now. Still, I'm grateful I caught her before she could ruin me completely. Those years of deception could have destroyed everything I worked for, but I fought back and I won. Now I focus on the future. I've started saving again, building a new foundation for myself. I've disconnected from her entirely, and I don't plan on ever letting her back in. She lost that right when she chose her affair over our marriage, over our life together. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply walking away, picking up the pieces, and proving to yourself that you're better off without the toxic people who try to tear you down. Most of all, I've realized that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. I've faced betrayal, loss, and heartbreak, and I've come out the other side still standing. That's what matters. Life will throw you curveballs, but how you respond defines you. I do. Regret loving her. Love is complicated, and I believe everyone deserves a chance. But I do regret trusting her blindly. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: protect yourself. Trust cautiously. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from the chaos, the lies, and the betrayal, choosing peace over pain and dignity over despair. That's what I've done, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm reclaiming my life, one step at a time.